Lauren, since I can speak to you directly for 1 second, I think you sang one of the most beautiful high holiday event celebrations I've ever heard in my life. So
I would agree.
beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Hey, Dan, we're dressed now.
I would agree with that 100%.
Thank you. It's really nice of you to say.
Thank you.
Well put, Ellen. I was just saying the exact same thing. And basically, that I said that I had so many emails and texts singing her praises that it was too many to send over. So, this is good opportunity. Please tell her over and over again how wonderful she is and how great a job she did, because it is all correct.
All the grandparents agree too.
Yeah. Well, it's good to have some backup, some family related support like that. But
Never used to.
so and again,
That's
one last thing. I will be right back.
You want something? No, somebody else is causing that.
It's crooked.
What? What? What did you say?
Whoops. Somebody's got feedback.
Yeah. I think it's Neil.
Don't worry. We feedback is easy to fix. All you have to do is mute everybody, which is what we're going to do right now.
Hi, Lauren.
Oh, muted. Okay, we can unmute Lauren. Lauren can say hi to her grandparents. That's important. That's good. So Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and Chag Sameach. So obviously this year our Simchat Torah celebration is a little bit different, to say the least. And I know that for many of us, it's a real highlight of the year. And having the opportunity to be in the sanctuary and dancing with the Torahs and perhaps imbibing just a little bit. If you happen to be anywhere in the vicinity of Neil Fagan, there's a good chance you'd have a drink in your hand at this point already in the service. And of course, some things we can recreate, some things we can be imaginative about, and there are lots of different ways to approach that. In certain cases, it's a little bit more challenging. So a little bit later on in the service, I'll explain a little bit about what my thought process was about how to approach this combined holiday of Shmini Atzeret, the end of Sukkot, and of this holiday of Simchat Torah, and perhaps to give a little bit of history and a little bit of background about what these holidays actually may or may not be. But in the meanwhile, we are going to start with what I think is the key part of both the holiday of Sukkot, the end of Sukkot being Shmini Atzeret, and this special additional thing called Simchat Torah, is about Simcha. It's about joy. It's about celebration. It's about singing. It's about, in Yiddish, Freilach. That's the main word that we usually associate with this time of year. So I think, the best way for all of us to begin to get ourselves into that mindset is that we were just saying, we have an incredible cantor who sings beautifully and actually has a new song to teach us tonight. So we're going to turn it over to Cantor Lauren, and she's going to give us an opening song and to give us a little sense of where we can begin tonight with, again, a sense of celebration and of joy. So we will turn it over to Cantor Lauren, and I will stop talking.
Adonai tzuri
Beautiful. Thank you, Cantor Lauren. That's great. That is really great. Afterwards, you'll tell us who the composer is. I'm curious to know. So we're going to begin our service, as we always do, with lighting our candles and remembering, of course, that tonight is Chag, so we will add Yom Tov as well. If you're lighting at home, you're more than welcome to join me. Otherwise, we're on page 120. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav etzivanu, lehadlik ner, shel Shabbat ve'yom tov. And we will turn now to page 130 as we begin Kabbalat Shabbat at the very top of the page. Lechu ne'anena, lechu ne'anena, lechu ne'anena l'Adonai. Lechu ne'anena, lechu ne'anena, lechu ne'anena l'Adonai. Naria, naria, letzur yishenu, nekadma fana betodaham. Naria, naria, letzur yishenu, bizmirot naria lo. Lechu ne'anena, lechu ne'anena, lechu ne'anena l'Adonai. Lechu ne'anena, lechu ne'anena, lechu ne'anena l'Adonai. We'll turn it back to Cantor Lauren as we turn to page 131.
Shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz. Shiru l'Adonai shir chadash. Shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz. Shiru l'Adonai shir chadash. Sing unto God all the earth a new song. I will sing unto God a new song. Sing unto God and we'll all sing along. All the earth a new song unto God. Shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz. Shiru l'Adonai shir chadash.
And we'll turn now to page 132, the last paragraph in Hebrew at the bottom of the page, Or Zarua. Or Zarua l'tzadik, ulehishrei lev simcha. 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 We'll go back to Cantor Lauren as we turn to page 134, Zamru l'Adonai.
Samru l'Adonai bechinor, bechinor.
Turn down to page 135, the last paragraph in Hebrew in the middle of the page, beginning with Romamu.
Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Lehar Kosho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Lehar Kosho. Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Romemu. Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu
We'll turn now to page 138 for Lecha Dodi, and a reminder again, the first, second, fifth, and ninth paragraphs. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. 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 Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad ishmi'anu el hamiuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad l'shemo tiferet v'litilam. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha ki hi mekor haberacha merosh mikedem nesucha sof maaseh b'machshavat tchila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Hitoreri ki va'orech uri shir daberi kevod Adonai alayich nigla. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Boi v'shalom ateret bala gam b'simecha u'v'tzola toch emunei am sekula boi chala. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. And we'll turn it over to Cantor Lauren as we turn to page 140, Tzadik Katamar, where the Hebrew indents right in the middle of the page.
Tzadik Katamar Yivrach Kerez Balbanon Yeisker Shetulim Bevet Adonai Mechatro יפריחו. עוד ינון בשיבה, דשנים ורעננים יהיו, להגיר כי אשר אדוני צורי מלוא עוולתו.
We turn now to page 144 for the Chatzi Kaddish.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, וילמד יברח יותר וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה בעגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם עולמי עלמיה, יתברך יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומן ויינשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי קודשו בריחו לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תמירן בעלמה ויאמרו אמן.
We turn now to page 146 for the Baruch Hu.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
Before we turn to the first blessing before the Shema on page 148, I just wanted to read you one little thing on page 147 that I just thought is beautiful. There is one who sings the song of his own life, finding everything within himself. There is one who leaves the circle of herself and sings the songs of her people. There is one whose voice rings with the song of humanity, hoping for the highest perfection. And there is one who rises even higher, uniting with all creatures, with all worlds, filling the universe with song. Nevarech, let us bless. Thought that was really lovely. So we're going to turn now to page 149 and we'll read together in English at the very top of the page. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows.
ומעביר יום ומביא לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו, אל חי וקיים, תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, המריב הרבים. אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת. תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו למדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו, בשוכנו וקומנו, נשיח פקודיך, ונשמח בדברי תורתך, ובמצוותיך, לעולם לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו מאורך ימינו, ובהם נגע יומם ולילה. מאהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד.
We turn now to page 154. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם emet. We'll turn now to page 157. We'll read together in English at the top of the page. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together, as we turn to page 158.
Tehi
turn now to the top of page 161.
Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storm. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Hashkivenu, Adonai Eloheinu. Hashkivenu, Leshalom. Behamidenu, Shomreinu lechaim. Ufros aleinu, Sukkot Shlomecha. Hashkivenu, Adonai Eloheinu. Hashkivenu, Leshalom. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storm.
Turn now to page 162. Veshameru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam Ein beheni uvein bnei Yisrael oti leolam ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz Uvayom Hashevi Shabbat Shabbat Vayinafash. So in a moment, we'll begin the Amidah together. Tonight we are on page 468 for the Festival Amidah. And remember again that it is Shmini Atzeret, Simchas Torah, which you are looking for in a few different places where there's some special inserts for the holidays. And as always, Cantor Lauren will help us to begin. Choice of yours to stand or sit. And of course, as always, go at your own pace. And if you are standing, to please be seated after. So again, we'll start on page 468 with Cantor Lauren, and then we will continue silently. Cantor Lauren, it's all you.
Adonai sefatay tiftach ufi hagiti latecha. Adonai, open up my lips and my mouth may declare your praise. Ay, 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 ay. עושה שלום עם רומיו, יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום עם רומיו, יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום עם רומיו, יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן.
And we'll turn now to page 371 to offer our Misha Berach, our prayer for healing. And we'll begin by thinking of those in our community and connected to our community who are in need of healing. And of course, invite you, if you're thinking of anyone who we've not mentioned or don't normally mention, to add their names to the chat or simply to hold them in your heart. In our community and connected to our community, we're thinking of Mitch Racklin, Jane London, Phyllis Silver, Toby Spitz, Steve Popkin, Catherine Guarino, Emunah Chava, Sandra Furman, Morty Lynn, Phyllis Katz, Raina Walsh, Deirdre Klein, Harav Tuvia Avraham, Menasher Vilea, Stephanie Skitt, Nancy DeMate, Andrew Lesser, Jean Ben Sadoun, Gloria Taradash, Judy Stern, Miriam Cornfield, Roz Brody, Chana Ruth Batsara, Marlise Silverberg, Louis Davidson, Susan Spruce, Fagel Tzipora Bat Elisheba Bat Sarah, Richard Gambino, Michelle Sawicki, Idle Basha Bat Yitzchak, Tzvi Menachem Ben Chaim, Rivka Bat Devora, Amy and Gavin Tucker, Janice Kurz, David Dowling, Neil Elliott and Eileen Rosen, Israel Ben Yitzchak, Ben Sion Ben Moshe, Lorraine Danis, Buddy Kossoff, Shelley Newmark, David Kyle Klopman, Rivka Bat Rachel, Sarah Bat Chana, Moshe Eliezer Ben Sivia, Peretz Ben Yehuda, and Leah Bat Naomi. And we'll turn it now to Cantor Lauren, who will lead us in the Misha Berach again on page 371.
To make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. The souls in need of healing, with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Thank you, Cantor. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Chag Sameach. I'm going to put on a gallery view so I can see all of your faces. So, as I said at the outset, this is a tough holiday to replicate on Zoom. And I would actually make the argument that in the form that we are most familiar with Simchat Torah, it is basically impossible to replicate the same feeling of being in the sanctuary, taking the Torahs out, Keelan banging on the keys. Cantor Lauren hasn't had the experience yet, but I'm sure she would have rocked out and it would have been great. And certainly our libations table, which I know is not an insignificant part of the evening for some of us. Howard and Neil, I think, usually are in charge of that, as I said. And certainly I will invite all of you, if you happen to have something next to you, it's perfectly acceptable to take a sip now and then. Enjoy yourselves, be comfortable. Neil's throwing his hand up, I can see. But But I have to tell you honestly, as I was sort of looking around the rabbinic world, looking at synagogues and trying to see kind of what everybody is doing, I actually have to say I was a little disheartened by the fact that it seemed that Simchat Torah was boiled down actually almost exclusively to two things: to dancing and music and to drinking. And I'm the last person in the world to say that I don't love those two things, and moderation, of course. But to me, it's problematic, and I will just explain a little bit as to why. So Simchat Torah is actually a very important holiday in its own right. It has a purpose behind it. It has a logic behind it. And Shmini Atzeret is the same idea. And these happen to be two of the more misunderstood holidays, largely because in the case of Simchat Torah, you won't find a mention of it anywhere in the Torah. And in many cases, actually, you won't even really find it mentioned in explicit form, even by the early version of the rabbis' works in the Mishnah and the Gemara. And Shmini Atzeret is equally complicated because it is considered by many to be part of Sukkot, when in reality it's its own holiday. The Torah says basically after the holiday of Sukkot that goes for 7 days, there is this thing called Shmini Atzeret, this 8th day of assembly. And unfortunately for us, the Torah doesn't really give a lot more description as to what its purpose was for and why to do it and what was done on it. So it may surprise you to know that while Shmini Atzeret has been observed since the most ancient days, Simchat Torah is actually a much more recent occurrence. Now, recent is probably not the right word for it, but think sort of early Middle Ages. And the reason for this is a little bit more complicated, which I'd like to, in place of the dancing and the singing and the drinking this evening, or at least in place of the dancing and the singing, to give you a little bit of education so that next year, when we hopefully are dancing and singing and all of this, that we can understand why it is so important that we are doing. So as it turns out, the idea of publicly reading the Torah, for example, is not in the Torah itself, except for one mention of something that is called Hakel. And the idea was that every 7 years, everybody would gather together, presumably in Jerusalem, and sections of the Torah would be read out loud for everybody who was there. That was the original idea of public Torah reading. Okay, I can see Lauren looking over to Aaron. You may not have gotten there yet in studies, but you will learn all about this, shortly, I'm sure. So what happens is over time, especially after the destructions of the temples, and especially after the destruction of the Second Temple, you have a very different reality for Jews, especially living in diaspora, right? Which is, how are we going to make sure that we're connected to this thing that we call Torah? And so the Jews who are living in Babylonia create their own sort of methodology, and the Jews who are living still in the land of Israel create their own methodology as well. One side decides that they're going to read every single week. They're going to take the Torah, divide it up into 54 portions that will create almost perfect symmetry across the year, some double portions here or there, and that you read the entire Parsha every single week. And the idea is that basically by the beginning and the end of the year, you have started the Torah and you've read it in its entirety. The other tradition that developed in Babylonia was different, which was the idea of, or actually I might have gotten the reverse, it might be in the land of Israel, which is that it's a lot to read every single Parsha, every single Shabbat. If you haven't done it yourself, if you haven't been to a Orthodox service where that's done traditionally, it takes a while. And so the rabbis decided that what would make sense is to divide each one of those Parshas into a third, and basically to read a third and a third and a third in 3 consecutive years, and only after 3 years complete the cycle of all of the reading. And so only over time, and this is why I said sort of towards the Middle Ages, do you eventually get a coalescing of sort of something between the two of them, which is keeping the idea of 54 Parshas, right, the division of the Parshas, but reading in what's called a triennial cycle, in which you're reading a third and a third and a third, and you're adding up. So why does this all matter? Because in the original version, as I said, the one that was divided up over 3 years, what they really were saying is that they didn't finish reading the Torah until after a 3-year cycle. Therefore, something like Simchat Torah, which is an annual observance, would have made no sense, because you would have been celebrating something that you hadn't actually yet achieved, right? In other words, if you're reading only a third of the Torah at a time, it makes no sense to celebrate the full reading if you haven't actually done the deed itself. So Simchat Torah eventually develops as this idea, as these two sort of methodologies combine, into the idea that every year we are in fact reading the entire Torah, okay, in one form or the other. We may not be reading every single word, but we're reading every single Parsha, and we are considering each and every element of the Torah every single year. And when you get to the completion of study of a group of readings, there is a need for a celebration. And this actually starts, is a Talmudic idea And the main idea of it is basically not related to the Torah at all, but is really something that's called a siyum. And a siyum basically means when you complete a study of a section of the Talmud, then you are meant to sit down and to have a seudah, to have a celebration, and to basically rejoice by the fact that you have made it from the beginning to the end of the tractate. So it's actually only building off of that, ironically, after the Talmud, that we then associate this idea of having Simchat Torah and celebrate. Okay, so that was a long-winded piece of history. Why does this now matter? Why is it relevant? And why did I feel somewhat uncomfortable about the idea that we have boiled this celebration down, as I said, to just about Freilach music and about drinking? Is because there is something really important actually happening here, and something that really does need to be acknowledged and to be celebrated with sincerity, which is that it is not a small task to begin the year studying the Torah and to end the year studying the Torah and to begin it immediately again. These are actually extremely important elements of what it means to be Jewish. Now, I'm not going to cast aspersions or judgment on anybody who didn't show up every single Shabbat, who didn't study every single portion, right? Even your rabbi, although the last Shabbat I had off, I think, was last January, so I probably have been here for pretty much everything. But the idea is that, we are making an attempt every year to not lose sight of how important the Torah is to us, how essential the task of studying it is to living a Jewish life. And in particular, not to just simply accept it and read it and move on, but to wrestle with it, to argue with it, to come to a Torah study and to debate it, to hear different perspectives on it. If we didn't do this, right? If we treated it basically as just a matter of common course, if we didn't acknowledge the end of one thing and the beginning of another, then every year would blend into the other. Every moment would blend into the next. Okay, it's important to have your Torah study continue unabated, right? We don't stop. We immediately end the reading and begin Breshit right again. But we do something important, which is to celebrate the fact that we've reached this milestone. Right? If there's one thing that I go back to time and time again that I appreciate about Judaism, is that it is, and this is really Heschel's idea, right? It is really about acknowledging the sacredness of time. Okay, about acknowledging the fact that we set aside times and places to focus our attention on something significant. And so when we end our reading of the Torah this year, by definition, by beginning again, we might feel like this is boring, right? It's repetitive, right? Why not read other things? Why not read a different section of the Haftarahs? Why not? The reason is the Torah is our core. It's the constant, the thing that remains the same. And it's part of the reason why, again, as I said, that the rabbis, after the destruction of the temple, after all of the other stuff disappears, after all the sacrifices are no longer possible, after there are no longer a priesthood and Levites, after all those things go out the window, there's one thing that we have, one foundation to continue to build upon, and that is the Torah itself. So it is essential, especially this year, I think, that we celebrate, and we celebrate not in the surface level way of dancing and singing and drinking. Those things are important. But really, I think this year, especially, to go a level deeper and to really celebrate individually what the Torah means to each and every one of us. So you have a homework assignment for this Chag, okay, which is to set aside 5 minutes for yourself between now and sunset tomorrow and ask yourself this question: what did the Torah mean to me this last year? And what do I hope it's going to mean to me this year? Right? What did I do last year that I'm proud of in terms of my Torah study? And where are the places that I want to look for growth? Where are the questions that I have? What are the big issues that are holding me back? What can I bug the rabbi with this year? Right? Take the time and really think about that. And I think in that way, while I, again, am as excited as everybody else, I hope, next year to be back and dancing and celebrating and drinking and all that stuff, that this year, let's just treat the year as different. Okay, but let's keep the core idea at the forefront of our minds and our hearts. Okay, let's not treat this holiday in a childish fashion. It is extremely important, even if it doesn't come from the Torah itself, ironically. It is extremely important. It is important to celebrate, but it is also important to recommit ourselves to the study of Torah. And this year especially, to make that at least a higher priority on our list of priorities. And I hope, as an invitation to all of you who maybe, feel intimidated by Torah study, intimidated by our Torah study, don't be. Don't be. It's a great opportunity to learn. So if you haven't done it before, pick one Saturday of the next couple of months and say, this is a Saturday at 12 o'clock. I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to come and be a participant, and I'm going to talk Torah with the rabbi and everybody else, and see where that goes for you. See where it can bring you. And I hope that, as I said, by next year, when we look back and celebrate another year of completion of our readings, that we will be transformed in a slightly different way. And I think it will make all that dancing feel that much sweeter, and the drinks to feel a little bit livelier if one does imbibe. But really, again, to celebrate this holiday in its truest form, which is to be joyous at the reality that we have this great gift that is known as the Torah. So with that, hopefully you have at least a little bit of history, a little bit of, let's say, gentle direction for the year to come, and a little bit of something to look forward to, as I said, to next year. So with that, I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and a Chag Sameach. And I'll invite us all now to turn to page 586 in our Sidurim, as we do Aleinu at the very bottom of the page. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, latet gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoyei ha'aratzot, velo samanu kemishpechot ha'adama, shelo samech elkenu kahem, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. And now I'll invite those who are in mourning and observing Yartzeit, if you so choose, to rise at home as we first remember those who have passed in recent months in our community. Nancy Fisher, Saul Fisher, Edwin Friedman, Sandra Friedman, Lois Herr, Philip Idone, Laura Kurtz, Madge Judith Parcher, Vera Shaps, Lisa Schneidman, Norma Small, Marjorie Weinberg Berman, Marvin Weiss, and Miles Ambrose. We also mark the Yartzeits that occurred during the last week for Libby Alpern, Benjamin Berkowitz, Gertrude Bogash, Rav Yoram Egosi, Florence Emanuel, Marcia Zweig Esses, Marcia Gilbert, Theodore Jaffe, Jean Judge, Claire Klausner, David Millman, Ann Moskowitz, Samuel Paul, Saul Paul, Max Rosenthal, and Ruth Rossick. And I'll invite anyone who was not mentioned, if you're thinking of someone this evening and you'd like to mention them in our chat, or again, just simply to hold their memories in your hearts and minds, as we invite the mourners to join me in saying the Kaddish on page 598. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah. Be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayichon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, b'agalav v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'le'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal Shemei d'kudsha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, Da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shalom harabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imramav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zichronam livracha, may every one of their memories be for a blessing. If you're standing, you are welcome to be seated at home. And again, Shabbat Shalom, everyone, Chag Sameach, and just a few announcements to make. First, of course, is to join us for services tomorrow that are live streamed again on our website, YouTube, Facebook, beginning at 10 o'clock. It's a full service, as it were. There are a lot of elements to it. As I said, part of Simchat Torah is reading the last few verses, I should say, of the book of Deuteronomy, immediately starting again with the words of Breshit. And in addition to that, there is Yizkor, there is Hallel. There's a lot of things going on. So please join if you feel comfortable. We'd love to have you. And then, of course, Torah study as usual, beginning at 12 o'clock on Zoom. Just a few other notes. This Sunday at 11 o'clock, our Social Justice Committee has organized a gleaning at Pike's Farm in Sagaponack to benefit the Sag Harbor Food Pantry. If you're interested in being able to participate, and again, this will be done socially distant, masks on, everybody far apart from each other. And if you don't know what gleaning is, that is the idea in the Torah, this idea of leaving elements of the grown produce to be given to those who are in need, who can't provide for themselves. So it is both a wonderful mitzvah and one that is very much rooted in Torah, as we talked about. So please just contact Shelley if you need directions to Pike's Farm. But again, that's this Sunday at 11 o'clock. Just a reminder that there is no Hebrew school this Monday because of Columbus Day, but the Social Justice Committee will still have its regular virtual meeting at 5 o'clock. This week, my classes will resume. One has changed. Wednesdays at 12 o'clock, I'll be teaching based off of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel's book on the prophets. So don't worry if you don't know about Heschel, if you don't own the book, just come to the class. Everything will be provided for you. And we're going to sort of work our way through the book as we go forward. And that'll be every Wednesday at 12 o'clock, probably until paternity leave. And then it will take a little bit of a break. Friday mornings as well, my Pirkei Avot class will be back at 9 o'clock as well. Again, just a reminder, neither of these classes require any prior knowledge, no Hebrew experience, nothing. Just come, have a good time, and learn. And let's see, just want to see here. October 18th at 2 o'clock, there is the Women's Rosh Chodesh group, which will be meeting on Zoom. So again, if anybody doesn't know about the Women's Rosh Chodesh group and would like to know more, please contact Eileen in the office, and she'll be happy to fill you in. And just a reminder also that on October 19th, if I remember correctly, at 7 o'clock, we have a special evening planned in which we are in partnership with the American Jewish Community Committee, AJC, and Eric Post, who is going to help us to process a little bit of the rising tides of anti-Semitism that we have seen increasingly over the last several years here in this country, but really has been a challenge, as we know, for many, many, many years. And Eric, who is the AJC representative on Long Island, will also help to give us a little bit more of a sense of the current realities that we are facing, and ultimately speaking how to, I tend not to love the word combat. I think it sends the wrong connotation, but I think ultimately to confront and ultimately overturn these elements that unfortunately have really been rearing their ugly head once again in very significant fashion, and I imagine will only get worse over the next few weeks. So with all of that, I don't want to end on the sad note of anti-Semitism. I want to end on a happy note, which is to celebrate with all of you. And I miss you terribly. And this is one of those holidays where it really doesn't feel the same. But we are going to hope and pray and do everything we possibly can to make sure that by next year we will be able to celebrate again differently. But without, putting too much pressure on her shoulders, I happen to think even across Zoom that Cantor Lauren's beautiful words and beautiful music helps to bring that Freilach sense of celebration and joy into this evening and into all the things that we are doing here at the temple. So I'm going to turn it back to Cantor Lauren, who will sing for us a little bit, and I'll get our Kiddush cups ready on this end, and then we'll do Kiddush. And and Oneg afterwards on Zoom. So of course, always welcome to join. And Cantor Lauren, you can take it away.
So we're going to close with the song that we started with, and the words, both the Hebrew and the English, can be found in the Siddur on page 180. Yehu leratzon imrefi ve'yon libi Yehu leratzon imrefi ve'yon libi lefanecha Adonai Tzuri Ro'ali Adonai Tzuri Adonai Tzuri Ro'ali. Go inside your heart, just be. Go inside your
what it wants, what it needs, what it yearns when you breathe. Go inside your heart and see. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be kind, be true. May they be acceptable to you, my rock, and my redeemer.
Okay, that's a keeper. That is a keeper, Cantor. That is awesome. Okay, so if you'd like to join with me, it's the Festival Kiddush, the Chag Kiddush on page 386. Let's just remember the melody for a second. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'am v'romanu mikol lashon v'kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav v'atiten lanu Adonai Eloheinu mi'ava Shabbatot lemenucha u'modim l'simcha chagim uzmanim l'sason. את יום השבת הזה ואת יום חג השמיני, חג העצרת הזה, זמן שמחתנו מקרא קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים. הבנו בחרת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, ושבת ומועדי קודשך, באהבה וברצון, בשמחה וששון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני, מקדש השבת וישראל והזמנים. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. Amen. Okay. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Chaim. You should be able to unmute yourselves now if you want to wish each other a Chag Sameach, a Shabbat Shalom, all that good stuff.
Shabbat Shalom.
Very good.
Shabbat Shalom.
Chag Sameach, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Very good. Okay, guys, take care of yourselves. Again, this is tomorrow at 10. Anybody wants to jump on our phone Zoom, you are welcome to.
Howard, Shabbat Shalom.
Yeah.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Howard. Friday night.
This is
Well
normally
done.
a big night for Howard Schwatsky.
It's a
Okay,
big
Howard
night.
Schwatsky is usually
Shabbat Shalom.
our bartender. You know. As a matter of fact, if you want to drive by Howard's house right now, he's got a whole table set up right outside. We have he's got you covered.
Okay, see you in a bit.
Chag Sameach.
I'm so mad.